Well, let's stick here with West Asia in a general sense, but slightly shift our focus here to Palestine, where, of course, there have been many, many developments on one of the key fronts of the struggle and solidarity with Palestinian people, which is to prevent people from speaking out in favor of the Palestinian cause in the United States and all across Europe. It really has become almost an epidemic of repression of free speech, you might say. Very happy to be joined as we continue this conversation by Nora Barrows-Friedman, who is a reporter and associate editor of the fantastic Electronic Intifada. Nora, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, comrades. It's so good to see you.
Well, it's great to see you. It's great to have you. Obviously, there's so much to reflect on. I was thinking a couple hours ago, thinking about this interview and everything that's happening with Mahmoud Khalil and just the broader attack on campuses. There's obviously two sides to it, because it's obviously terrible and completely ridiculous and totally unconstitutional in the case of what they've done to Mahmoud, at least in my opinion. But it also does, to me, reveal something else I think is interesting, Nora, and that is how important the encampments were in driving the discussion around Palestine, that now there's like a whole of government effort to prevent anything like that ever happening again. So that also felt notable to me in terms of how we frame this. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that was the point of the encampments and of the student intifada in general, was to make it, uh, to really kind of put a wrench into the system of these institutional relationships with the Israeli war machine here on U.S. soil. At a place like Columbia, I mean, students have been, and it's not just, been since last year, but for decades, students have been fighting to get Columbia to stop participating in Israeli apartheid and in the ongoing occupation of Palestine. Just for so long. There have been many ways in which students have participated in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, especially at Columbia and at, neighboring universities in New York and across the country. And so the encampments last year were to bring that issue to the fore and to really challenge the Columbia administration and the Biden administration politically on their efforts to, purport to be bastions of free speech and academic freedom and freedom of inquiry, and really put their feet to the fire and say, if you believe in those tenets, which are, objectively good tenets, as a university should have, then why are you complicit with the genocide in Gaza? And what the Columbia administration decided to do in response was to enact the most draconian, anti-free speech measures on their own students, on certain members of faculty, to say you can't talk about our relationship with Israel. You can't say the word Palestine without, getting punished. And we're going to enforce that with the New York City Police Department to come and beat you up. It's just been absolutely horrific to see the response by these university administrators working on behalf of Democratic lawmakers last year, and now working to enforce Trump's, anti-free speech policies. So it's just, it's shameful. It's
Mm,
shameful.
mm,
I'm really glad that you mentioned, Nora, the Democratic role here, because obviously what Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are doing is like a bit on steroids, but the
Yeah.
Democrats laid the foundation for everything that we're witnessing take place right now. They laid the foundation because they were in charge when everything you just mentioned was happening at this time last year. When they started using police against protesters, and in some cases, like for example in UCLA, basically police like letting actual fascists, come onto
Yeah.
campus and beat up and almost kill people over these encampments. There's obviously been a lot of pressure from very powerful individuals with lots of money, people like Bill Ackman at the forefront, pushing lawmakers in both parties to, police, you basically use stormtroopers against the students of America, against the young people of America. And of course, we saw what happened at Columbia last year. And, this is like a new chapter in all of this, because in this case, and something you guys have covered at the Electronic Intifada, is the Columbia administration is complicit in in ICE coming onto campus, on campus housing, and essentially kidnapping Mahmoud Khalil. They have done nothing to protect their students, and their international students are so vulnerable to the point where, I mean, you can correct me on this, it was something like the Pulitzer Center at Columbia. Whoever the guy who Jelani Cobb, who heads the Pulitzer Center, told international
He's the dean
students
of the journalism school. Yeah.
Told them, hey, sorry, you guys just need to go delete anything you said about the Middle East on the internet. It's too controversial of a topic. It's better to just say nothing at all. I mean, what kind of country is this?
Yes.
What kind of free speech is this?
We can't protect you. That's what he said. Sorry, we can't protect you. The dean of the
And
journalism school.
As if they don't have the ability to do something, by the way. These people can choose to do more than tell them we can't protect you. They're leaving these kids to fend for themselves. It's completely outrageous. And now you have a situation where Mahmoud Khalil is in ICE detention in Louisiana. He is a green card holder. I mean, and honestly, the more I look at this case, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way, the more you see, there's no way this will stand up. I mean, I knock on wood when I say that, because you never know. But legally speaking, this can't possibly stand up to scrutiny, but they're basically torturing this kid to make a show of it. And anyways, that's a lot of commentary for me. It's just utterly shocking. And I'm watching this happen from Lebanon. I'm just like, what the hell, man? But I'm just curious your thoughts on the lack of protection for students who got admitted to these universities, who are assets to these universities, and what it means, generally speaking, about the culture in American academia moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with your commentary there. It is absolutely appalling, and it's also not entirely surprising. As someone who's been watching very carefully the machinations of higher education administrators over the last, 15, 20 years, where universities, tout themselves as, like I said, these bastions of free speech. And, Columbia University itself has a whole, class dedicated to where it went wrong in 1968 in again, doing the thing that they just did last year and now, which is, throwing their students to the cops. So they tout themselves as these, progressive academic institutions of, very, I mean, Columbia, like every parent wants their kid to go to Columbia, or did, uh, until recently. But really what they have become, and what they are proving that they have become, is really more like hedge funds for their massive endowments. I mean, Columbia itself has an endowment that's like, as big as the GDP of a small country. So protecting their endowments, protecting their donors, protecting their relationships to power, protecting their relationships to research institutions, like the ones developing weapons and surveillance technology in Israel, using Palestinians as really the lab rats for this new weapons technology that is sold by Israel to the United States, that is then used by the U.S. police around the country. And so I think, really what the last, year, but especially the last week has really revealed is that these administrations really do not care about their students. I mean, as the Columbia School of Journalism, basically mandating, dictating to their journalism students that they should really shut up about Palestine. And if they have said anything on their social media about Palestine or Gaza in particular, then they should scrub it. And, the university can't protect you, and free speech really doesn't mean anything here. It really just reveals what these elite institutions have always been about all along. And that's about power. It's about money. It's about their investments. It's about their donors. And it's about their access to power. It was the Biden administration, and now it's the Trump administration, but the policies remain the same.
No, I think it's such a good point. I mean, yeah, I think $14 billion is the Columbia endowment. However, it is like 50. So like if they wanted to fight, obviously they could fight. You got $14 billion in the bank. You got nothing to worry about. But they're totally integrated into the top levels of imperialism in every way. And it's sad to see Jelani Cobb, who is a alumnus of Howard University, my alma mater, because the history of HBCUs was always to protect people against McCarthyism. Many of the academics who fled the Holocaust found work at HBCUs more so than other places who didn't want them because they were anti-Semitic in so many ways. So I know he knows all of that without even a shadow of a doubt. So to turn your back on it is a shame. And it does speak to, I think, the point you're making of the integration of these into power, of the importance of Palestine in the broader sort of geopolitical sort of calculus of, a handful of elites wanting to control the world. It reminds me of something that Alex Karp said, I think it was who's the head of Palantir. I think it was at the World Economic Forum at some point in 2024 or something like that. And he was like, we have to defeat these campus protests because if they win, we'll never be able to deploy U.S. troops to any country ever because it'll be like a victory for people who are against imperialism. And I thought it was a great mask-off moment, and it was somewhat true, but it shows how Palestine it's an issue in its own right that is so critically important, and we should never, I think, take away from that, but that really it's the entryway into many other issues and the fear that these people feel to see the elite institutions, the huge number of people in the streets, trade unions, which were traditionally, very pro-Israel, starting to shift a little bit, that Palestine has opened up this kind of broader fissure, I think, in a lot of these countries in the global north.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true. It's why, these Israel lobby organizations identified, maybe it was like 10 years ago, that U.S. campuses are the battleground. And this is why they have sunk so many, countless millions of dollars into propping up these relationships with Israeli institutions, with funding networks of Israel lobby organizations, kind of astroturfing as grassroots, student-led groups on campuses, encouraging those students to spy on other students and members of faculty who talk about Palestine. That's why they've identified campuses as the so-called battleground, because that is where people come to learn about the world and develop critical thought and really interrogate the U.S.'s relationships to these imperialist wars of occupation and colonialism, and so if God forbid the young students learn about what's happening in Palestine and then connect it to how their tuition dollars are being used to develop weapons that are killing people halfway around the world. They'll throw everything to try and stop that and convince politicians to take up the fight and really to make free speech a thing of the past. I mean, really just shredding the Constitution in all sorts of ways and being very proud to do so. It's remarkable.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, to affirm what you're saying in terms of the amount of resources that have put into turning college campuses into these battlegrounds. I mean, these Zionist organizations for more than a decade. And I mean, I used to cover it with you guys at the Electronic Intifada.
Yeah.
Like they would host conferences and meetings devoted exclusively, like really fancy conferences, devoted exclusively to strategizing about how to push back against the popularity of Palestine solidarity and activism on college campuses, and here we are. That's where this is coming from, in conjunction with imperialism. But specific to Mahmoud Khalil's case, Nora, I wanted to ask about a couple things here, because the unprecedented nature of this, there's a few angles to it. The one is using ICE and the deportation machine to politically persecute somebody. That's a new element here. But Trump has been warning, Trump's people have been warning about this, about deporting so-called Hamas supporters. And then the other angle is to address that, because they're basically saying this guy was supporting Hamas. I mean, there's literally zero evidence that's the case. But also that's what makes this a free speech case too, because technically you can say whatever you want in the US, even if it's supposedly, even if it's the most horrific thing. Like Nazis have been defended by constitutional lawyers in the US, not because the lawyers agreed with what Nazis are saying, but because espousing views, no matter what they are, no matter how vitriolic they might seem, not that I'm equating someone supporting Hamas to Nazis supporting Nazi stuff. I'm just saying the idea of the free speech in the US is that you actually can say whatever the hell you want. That's one. Two, going after a green card holder, which is somebody who's supposed to have measures of protection that are basically like an American citizen. I mean, there's so much happening here. And then to go after Mahmoud of all people too, because they can't point to anything he said to even remotely try to suggest he's supported any group that's been prescribed by the US as a terrorist organization whatsoever.
Yeah, this is a test, right? And Palestine has always been a test in terms of how far people are willing to go to defend the rights of people, either to speak or to exist as people. And here, in the case with Mahmoud Khalil, I mean, he was a very public-facing representative of the student movement. He was targeted by Columbia professors who doxed him and tried to smear him and denigrate his reputation. He asked Columbia administration for protection. I think the day before he was abducted by ICE goons. And yeah, as you said, he's a green card holder. That entitles him to all, basically all the constitutional protections that American-born citizens have. And the government has been very open about making Mahmoud's case a precedent for other cases. They've already said, they've admitted that he had broken no laws, but that his viewpoints, his political opinion, was somehow a danger to the U.S.'s national security interests. And that kind of blanket statement, I think, should terrify everyone, especially people who, support the idea that Palestinians are a people and should have rights. Because as the U.S. government, no matter which administration you pick over the last 80 years, has tried to affirm, that Palestinians have no rights as people or as, students or anything. And they've said, now trashing the Constitution in order to deport Mahmoud Khalil, a green card holder, that's only going to, if they can get away with that, then they're going to start getting away with naturalized citizens, deporting naturalized citizens, or imprisoning, U.S. born citizens because of their political speech. And that's terrifying. And university administrators, should be horrified that they are rolling out the red carpet for these kinds of anti-constitutional policies, and that are using their tuition-paying students to be the first ones under attack. It's horrifying, and it only underscores. I mean, the fact that they're going after people who are expressing their political opinions and criticizing Israel and the U.S.'s genocide, the Holocaust against the Palestinian people. I mean, that if they were, it underscores how terrified the right wing and the Zionists are by people more and more coming to the conclusion that the U.S. and Israel are wrong and that they are occupiers and genociders, and that their relationship as imperialist twins needs to be examined, so I think it just kind of like it undergirds the frailty of the Zionist and U.S. Governmental positions, and this is why they're striking back at the most vulnerable populations this hard.
Well, Nora, it was a pleasure, as always, to have you with us. Nora Barrows-Friedman, Associate Editor at the Electronic Intifada, which everyone needs to be following. Thank you so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks, Eugene and Rania. Good to be here.